Hello there and welcome. This is All 24 News World News Program with me, Karim Fazakri, coming to you live from Algiers. The headlines. Zionist attacks have killed a second top militant from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group as the death toll continues to rise from airstrikes in Gaza. Islamic Jihad resistance group has launched a series of rockets to the Zionist side as retaliation act against the last occupation assault. Also coming up, flanked by cheering crowds, the front-runner in Kenya's presidential election sought to make their final push for votes on Saturday. The Chinese military said on Sunday around noon local time that it continued live fire drills in the waters and airspace around Taiwan. Hello again, you are following today's top stories. First in our news, the Zionist attacks have killed a second top militant from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group as the death toll continues to rise from airstrikes in Gaza. 6 children and several fighters, including leaders Khaled Mansour and Taysir Jabari, are among the 32 Palestinians reported to have died. Injuries number of the Zionist attack has exceeded the 250 people, while the number will probably rise. The bodies of 8 martyrs were reportedly found under the debris of the house that was destroyed by the Zionist warplanes on the heads of its occupants last night in Al-Aqsa, or in a Shouth neighborhood of Rafah camp in the southern Gaza Strip. The bodies of the martyrs were pulled out from rubble by Palestinian citizens, rescue teams, ambulance crews, and civil defense. Still with the same matter, Zionist Prime Minister Yair Lapid and Defense Minister Benny Gantz said on Sunday that the military operation in the Gaza Strip would continue as long as necessary. The statement emerges from declarations broadcast by the Zionist channel Khan as the operation launched on Friday is still ongoing. Islamic Jihad resistance group has launched a series of rockets to the Zionist side as a retaliation act against the last occupation assault. Islamic Jihad group has fired over 160 rockets that were sometimes intercepted by the Zionist Iron Dome. However, many other rockets reached Tel Aviv. Osama Ayadi has the story.
In retaliation to the Zionist assault in the Gaza Strip, Islamic Jihad resistance group from the region has decided to launch a large number of long-range rockets towards Tel Aviv in the occupied Palestinian lands. This comes after the occupation forces had started the fight by killing one of the leaders of Islamic Jihad resistance group. The Zionist forces also killed several Palestinians in Gaza, including over 5 children. Moments after the launching of the rockets by the Palestinian group, sirens were heard going off. Zionist media did not announce any casualties on their side. However, reports revealed that several deaths followed the fall of rockets that penetrated the Iron Dome. Throughout the day, Gaza resistance groups regularly launched rounds of rockets into the southern region of the Zionist-occupied lands.
The Palestinian resistance continued shelling the Israeli-occupied lands, with rockets fired in retaliation to the Israeli assault on Gaza. This morning, the resistance shelled Al-Quds and Tel Aviv, in addition to settlement sites.
Palestinian Islamic Jihad troops fired at least 160 rockets across the border, sending people running to bomb shelters as far as the city of Madin. A number of the missiles was intercepted. However, the next hours will surely reveal the casualties in the Zionist side, as the resistance group has explained that some tactics of their troops could break through the Zionist territory and would surely succeed to penetrate the Iron Dome.
At a time when Palestinian civilians are being bombed by the Zionist artillery, occupation settlers moved to Al-Aqsa Mosque in a more provocative move for Palestinians. Many of the natives in Al-Quds were arrested by the Zionist forces as they showed the refusal of such acts amid the rising tension between the Islamic Jihad resistance group and Israeli occupiers. The Zionist attacks on the Palestinians have caused damage and destruction in the besieged city of Gaza. Several people were brutally killed and dozens of houses were destroyed, leaving residents homeless in their own land. Nabil Khazini.
The brutality continues and the Zionist forces show again that their aggression on civilians in Palestine is not going to stop. This belligerence, or rather inhuman acts targeting unarmed civilians, have killed Palestinians, among them innocent children.
We were sitting in the street and suddenly we saw an explosion. We came running to the place and found body parts lying on the ground. And there were no ambulances. There were torn children. We carried the children in the cars because there were no ambulances. And this is what happened.
In Gaza, scenes of grief and destruction of properties are the outcome of the Zionist attacks. Only furniture and personal belongings from damaged houses are what is left in a long time besieged city where residents speak only of panic among civilians when airstrikes broke out.
Without any warning, they targeted the area, which is the Ashaut area near the Kuwaiti hospital. Of course, it's a camp crowded with children, women, and elderly.
The continued blockade of the occupier on Gaza has resulted in the Palestinian Energy Authority to announce the suspension of the only power plant in the area. The occupation authorities had announced suddenly on Friday afternoon that they would enter quantities of fuel for the station, but it did not. Another betrayal, a used to in Palestine, before the aggression on the Gaza Strip began.
The power plant will stop working due to shortage of fuel needed for its operation. It has already been shut down, so the power company lost 60 megawatts that this plant was supplying.
The Zionist entity continues its strategy of aggression at a time when the watching world is blind against these age-old tactics, bombardments and siege. But in Palestine, people have vowed to resist till the end.
And to get more on what's happening on the ground there in Gaza, we are joined live by Mr. Moti Misbah, who is a Palestinian activist. Hello, Mr. Moti Misbah, and thank you for joining us. Can you please update us about the latest in the Gaza Strip? Were there any other attacks last night? Hello?
Yes, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for,
Yes, it seems
Hello?
that yesterday the health ministry in Gaza declared that the hospitals has not enough equipment as well as medicines to deal with this emergency situation in Gaza. So how are the people there, and how could the people in Gaza survive without such equipment? I mean, these attacks left like great damage, and there isn't enough medicine to cure the wounded people. What can you tell us about this, and how can you update us?
Yes, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for your special coverage for the ongoing Israeli brutal aggression, which is still waged against the Palestinian civilians here in Gaza Strip. Actually, I think that the scenes come from the ground. Actually, speaks louder than any words, because the situation here is very horrific. As you have mentioned, that the brutal aggression is continued. Until this moment, we have more than 32 Palestinians were killed, and more than 275 Palestinians were injured over the ongoing Israeli airstrikes against the Palestinian areas here in Gaza Strip. As we have expected yesterday, that the death toll is expected to rise, and yes, it has risen over the ongoing and deliberate intentional targeting of the Israeli occupation to the Palestinian residential areas and populated areas. Today, even this number is expected also to rise if the aggression is continued and if the airstrikes are continued against the Palestinian people. Today, I think amid this ongoing aggression against the Palestinian people, I think there are many things that we need to consider. The first thing is that this aggression is waged amid the ongoing inhumane Israeli siege practiced and imposed against Gaza since 2007 so far, which caused devastating humanitarian conditions here in Gaza. We have devastated infrastructure, we have a fragile health sector, we have deteriorating humanitarian conditions, we have unemployment rate for more than 75%. And we have, and according to the international human rights organizations and bodies, that Gaza today is an unlivable place over the ongoing inhumane siege imposed against the Palestinians.
And do you think that any humanitarian
Strip.
aid could actually reach the Gaza Strip? Do you think that perhaps the Israeli settlers are going to let any aid enter the Gaza Strip?
Yes, as the Israeli occupation actually has a constant policy with this regard. They are trying just to keep the noses of the Palestinian in Gaza just above the water. They are not going to allow to lift the siege because they are dealing with this kind of siege and with this inhumane siege as a political mean to twist the arm of the Palestinian people and to blackmail the Palestinians here in Gaza Strip. So politically, it's not easy for the Israeli occupation to lift the siege because they are trying, as I have mentioned, to blackmail the Palestinians with that kind of a humanitarian side and humanitarian condition, as they know that the Palestinian people here is suffering. They understand and realize that the Palestinians here are suffering from
Quite understood,
deteriorating
Mr. Mutti
humanitarian
Musbah. Thank you
conditions.
so much. Mr. Mutti Musbah, a Palestinian activist, you were live with us from Gaza. Gaza is one of the Palestinian cities that has resisted a lot of assaults by the Zionist occupiers. The territory of Gaza is 41 kilometers long, from 6 to 12 kilometers wide, and has a total area of 365 square kilometers. The population of Gaza is almost 2 million people, which makes it a very dense city in terms of population. Poverty is a dominant feature of the city, as more than 50% of its population suffers unemployment and lives under poverty line. It has been under the Zionist siege for 15 years as the occupiers control 2 of its 3 border crossings, in addition to air and water control of the ins and outs of the city. And finally, in our Gaza strike file, following the mass destruction caused by the Zionist air raids on Gaza Strip, Jordanian protesters assembled on Saturday outside El Kalouti Mosque, hundreds of meters away from the Zionist embassy. The angry protesters chanted and held banners showing support for Palestinians in Gaza. To other world news now. The Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese military said on Sunday around noon local time that it continued live fire drills in the waters and airspace around Taiwan. As planned, the Chinese military said the Chinese forces took part in drills focused on land attacks and long-range airstrikes around the island on what is expected to be the final day of extensive exercises. Moving on now to a different matter. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered in Colombo to release the detained protesters and the resignation of the current president. Islam said on the following report.
Protests in Sri Lanka seem to show no end, as hundreds of pro-democracy activists took to the streets on the outskirts of the capital, Colombo, calling for the release of the detained demonstrators and to put an end to the state of emergency imposed by the current president's government to contain public anger over the economic turmoil of the country.
Freedom of expression and to oppose corruption are our rights. A government does not need to gift it to us. It is a fundamental right in the Constitution. All these democratic rights have now been suppressed.
The detainees are believed to be the main forefront of the protest movement, who some of them had received travel bans by the Colombo Magistrates Court. According to Human Rights Watch, Sri Lanka's government was using emergency regulations to suppress the protests, which seek political reform and liability for the country's status quo.
For more than 100 days, the people of this country carried out a massive struggle against the corrupt rulers and the destruction of this country. After the struggle, this government has begun hunting the leaders of the protests. More than 10 have been arrested, some have been jailed.
The protesters condemned Wickremesinghe's government, saying that democratic rights were being curbed. Ranil Wickremesinghe has been ruling as a president since July, despite public anger which stormed his official residence last month when he was a prime minister and demanded his resignation, saying that he is also an ally to the ousted president, Rajapaksa, and his family. It's worth mentioning that the angry protests in Sri Lanka erupted after long months of severe shortages of fuel, food and other necessities, with no indications looming to change the country's paralyzed economic and political situation.
Prak Sakoon, speaking in his capacity as Special Envoy to Myanmar of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, warned that further executions would force the regional grouping to reconsider how it engages with fellow member Myanmar. Efforts by Myanmar's neighbors to help restore peace and normalcy to the strife-torn Southeast Asian nation were hindered by the country's recent executions of 4 political activists.
And I say it clearly, publicly, if more executions are conducted, then things will have to be reconsidered. Our position will also have to be reconsidered. And all 9 foreign ministers of ASEAN agree on that position. As Special Envoy, I won't give up on my effort to continue to help Myanmar and to help the people of Myanmar to not experience the tragedy that Cambodia have experienced.
4 more ships carrying grain and foodstuffs have set out from Ukrainian ports under a recent landmark deal signed in Istanbul. The Ukrainian Seaports Authority said the 4 bulk carriers were loaded with almost 170,000 tons of corn and other foodstuffs. People who live close to a sizable nuclear power plant outside of Zaporizhia expressed their concern that fighting between pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian forces in the area could result in a catastrophe similar to that of Chernobyl disaster of 1986. The largest nuclear power plant in Europe is close to the Russian-controlled city of Enerhodar, despite the fact that it is still run by Ukrainian employees. It was captured by Russian forces in March, just 1 week after Moscow sent troops into Ukraine. Following months of negotiations between Chadian forces and rebel factions hosted by the Arab nation, the head of the military government in Chad met with Qatar's ruling emir on Saturday. According to reports, Sheikh Tamim wished David luck in the upcoming national dialogue scheduled for August 20th in the Chadian capital of N'Djamena. Flanked by cheering crowds, the front-runners in Kenya's presidential election sought to make their final push for votes on Saturday under tight security, capping months of frantic campaign ahead of the August 9th polls. Abdurrahim Kashur on what follows.
On Saturday, the front-runners in Kenya's presidential race were scheduled to make one last speech for support, and in months of frantic campaigning ahead the election on August 9. William Ruto, the deputy president, and Raila Odinga, a long-time opponent who is now supported by the ruling party, are competing to reach the government's top post. The president of the East African powerhouse state, as it struggled with the cost of living crisis.
They said this was a constitutional moment. We told them no, this is an economic moment. They told us it is about changing the constitution. We told them no, it is about changing the economy.
For the sake of Kenya, I will shake the hand of my rivals and pay the political price if I have to. I will shake their hand if I win, and I will shake their hand if I don't.
Kenyans hope this election will open a new chapter in Kenya's history, with neither candidate belonging to dominant Kikuyu tribe, which has produced 3 of the country's 4 presidents.
The reason as to why we are here, as first, is to celebrate of our hero. Raila is our hero. Raila has been fighting for us. Raila has been there for us, and he is the only salvation that today we have in Kenya.
Trust in Raila Omolo Odinga. He is our father of this nation, of this country. We know that when he will become the 5th president, freedom is back in Kenya. And that is what we are waiting, just Baba to be the 5th president.
With large ethnic voting blocs, Kenya has long suffered politically motivated communal violence around election time, notably after 2007 poll, when more than 1,100 people died. The run-up to this year's poll has been largely calm, with the police planning to deploy 100,000 officers on elections day to ensure security, and the international community calling for a peaceful vote.
Lightning struck a crude oil storage tank in the Cuban city of Matanzas on Friday, causing a huge fire and at least 4 explosions. According to Cuban state media, more than 49 people were injured, 2 of whom were in critical condition. Firefighters and rescuers worked throughout the night to contain the blaze and prevent it from triggering more explosions. Former guerrilla fighter Gustavo Petro is about to become Colombia's first ever leftist president. Petro will officially take office on Sunday. Speaking to Colombia's indigenous community representatives, Petro promised major reforms in the country, including fighting for peace and environmental justice, as well as reopening relations with neighboring Venezuela. To the United States now, former President Donald Trump overwhelmingly won an unofficial straw poll of attendees who were asked who they preferred as the Republican nominee for president in 2024 at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Texas, USA. In an address Saturday to the conference, former President Donald Trump aired grievances and offered explanations on the January 6th assault as well as other matters. And for more world news, let's follow this report.
Hussam Din Jabali, official spokesperson for Tunisian National Guard, revealed on Saturday that Tunisian naval units fueled 17 attempts at irregular immigration, during which 255 illegal immigrants with different nationalities, most of them Africans, were rescued.
337 new COVID cases reported in the Chinese mainland, according to the National Health Commission on Saturday. Meanwhile, many states in China have witnessed the increase of COVID-19 cases, where Hainan reported 297 new cases, and about 25 cases were divided all over Beijing, Henan, Hunan, and Jiangsu.
At least 3 people died and another 21 were injured this Saturday afternoon when an artifact placed on the edge of a road exploded in a neighborhood in western Kabul, where mainly reside members of a Shiite Hazara minority.
An attack on a provincial representative from the political party of the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan. Gunmen in northwest Pakistan killed 4 persons, including 2 police, according to authorities. The attack happened in Khan's party-controlled Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province's conservative Lower Dir district, namely in the Maidan area.
It's time for a reminder of our top stories. Zionist attacks have killed a second top militant from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group as the death toll continues to rise from airstrikes in Gaza. Islamic Jihad Resistance Group has launched a series of rockets to the Zionist side as retaliation act against the last occupation assault. Flanked by cheering crowds, the front-runners in Kenya's presidential election sought to make their final push for votes on Saturday. And finally, as you found out in our news, the Chinese military said on Sunday around noon local time that it continued live fire drills in the waters and airspace around Taiwan. We reached the end of our program. This is Karim Zachary signing off. Thank you for tuning in. And for more updates, you can join our social media platforms on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and even YouTube. Take care.